session, conversation this morning among the panelists, and we're very committed to having time for interaction with the audience as well. So we're going to go halfway through the time and have some audience questions and comments, and then to very, very briefly introduce this distinguished panel that we have here, and then we're going to launch into a question and answer period. On my left, immediate left, is Professor John Cleland, a demographer whose name all of you know, and he's from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. On his left is Clémentine Rossier from the Institut de Démographie et de Socioéconomie from the Université de Geneva. On her left is Nkechi Owu from the University of Ghana. Then we have Paul Nyachai, who's the regional director from the Challenge Initiative East Africa, and His Honor Roland Mulamwezo, who since 2016 has been the mayor of the Nakawa division of Kampala City. So we're very, very thrilled and honored to have you here, Mr. Mayor. Without further ado, I'm going to start with my questions for John Cleland. And John, would you please start us off with a brief global and historical overview of urbanization?
I'll do my best in 5 minutes. Urbanization is part and parcel of demographic transition and economic modernization. And it all starts with mortality decline. Until infectious diseases begin to be controlled, death rates in pre-transitional cities exceeded birth rates, limited. That allows, it engenders population growth. Agricultural modernization and trade allows a food surplus to grow a burgeoning urban population. The advent of manufacturing sucks in the rural population. Productivity is higher in manufacturing and most urban occupations than amongst farmers. That increases the wealth of the country. It's a huge shift in labor force composition. So in the USA in 1850, half the population was engaged in agriculture. Now it's 2%. Contraception and fertility decline starts typically in cities and urban areas and spreads to rural areas. Over time, population increase lessens, they stop together. Manufacturing over time gives way to a service economy. So here we are today. Global urbanization is continuing, where a little over half the world's population is urban. That's projected to rise to 2/3 by the middle of the century. In Europe and North America, the percentage of population living in urban areas is close to 80%. That's not going to increase any further. And ultimately, urbanism, the urban way of life, spreads to rural areas through electronic connections and road and transport connections. So the difference, ultimately, the difference between rural ways of life and urban ways of life disappears, I put to you.
That's very helpful, John, for the overview. Can you apply a little bit of that analysis to what's happening specifically in Africa now?
Well, there are similarities and differences. Similarities is that urbanization in Africa is driven by mortality decline and population increase. That's led to urbanization. It's similar that urban living conditions in Africa due to rapid growth of the urban population are appalling. UN Habitat estimates that well over half of Africa's urban population lives in slums. And this is exactly the same that was happening in Europe and North America 150 years ago. Living conditions in New York and Manchester, the great manufacturing centers in Europe and North America, people lived appalling lives. So that those two similarities. The third similarity is that fertility decline also has started in Africa in urban areas, some 20 or 30 years ago. The difference is that Africa is a much earlier stage of urbanization. Only about 40% at the moment are urban, compared to 80% in Europe and North America. Huge regional differentials that I don't fully understand. So the fraction urban in West Africa is far higher than in East Africa. Why would that be? And yet fertility hasn't declined as much in West Africa as in East and Southern Africa. It's the dilemma that we don't really understand. The pace of urbanization in Africa is somewhat faster than it was in historic Europe or North America, but no faster than in Asia. Now the big difference is that, as we heard from the plenary this morning, that the growth in the urban population in Africa is driven far more by high birth rates than it was in historic Europe and North America. So roughly 2/3 of urban population increase is driven by an excess of births over deaths rather than rural urban migration. And the other crucial difference is that thus far, urban growth in Africa has not been driven by manufacturing. That's absolutely crucial because historically no country has really escaped from poverty into a middle or high income status without going through a phase of manufacturing. The big question for African development is, will you be able to attract the huge inward investment and application of domestic savings to drive an industrialization agenda, or can you in this world skip that historic phase and move straight into a service economy? I don't think anybody knows the answer, but that's, I think, the overriding question for Africa's development.
Thank you, John. That's a wonderful start. And we're going to move now to asking Clementine, who is extremely familiar with the lessons learned from the Ouagadougou Health and Demographic Surveillance System, to talk a little bit about the situation that might be paradoxical in some ways in Ouagadougou. What's happening there with family planning, supply and demand?
Thanks, Judith. Yeah, let me tell you a little bit what's happening in urban Burkina Faso. So these last few years, we have seen a tremendous increase in contraceptive prevalence. We were at 22% of modern method users in 2014 in urban areas, and it grew to 37% in 2019, so in just 5 years. And in rural areas, the prevalence grew too, but at a lower level. So of course, this great progress is due to coordinated efforts at the global and national level. And there is a real, starting all with, or perhaps even before, the Ouagadougou Declaration in 2011. There's a very strong political will to push family programs forward. And last year, the country won the leadership prize at the Kigali Family Planning Conference, just to as an indicator of this political will. Also, the government declared that contraceptive would be free, but we're still to see that at the national level. Now it's been tried out in 2, I think, regions. So, but all that being said, despite this great progress, the prevalence is still relatively low, especially if you compare it to Eastern Africa, as just said. And and especially among the urban poor. So I was asked to give you a sort of a summary of what the reasons are behind this relatively high unmet needs, these low prevalence of contraception. And I would sum the issue up by mentioning 2 big problems. So the first problem, I would say, is related to the nature of demand. Because the first problem with, so there is a demand for family planning. Couples and women want to space, they want fewer children. But this demand is to some extent misinformed. People still have lots of fears of side effects. They don't know what methods they should use. They are not sure about using modern methods. And moreover, this demand is sometimes conflicted, meaning, especially among the urban poor, people want fewer children, but they also want enough to have enough to support them in old age. So misinformation, conflict in preferences, and then finally, another problem is that women often lack the resources to negotiate this demand when they turn to their partner. And here I want to mention a recent study in Ouagadougou, a WHO global gender use study led by Nathalie Swawanago, which shows very nicely in qualitative material how the double sexual standard is instilled among teenagers, among young boys and girls. Young girls learn to be submissive, and they learn that reproductive things are their things. Men learn to be dominant, and so women are made queen of a kingdom without the resources to really implement an agenda in that queendom. So this misinformed, conflicted, and disempowered demand, when it meets, and that's the second big problem, low quality services and a high level of unmet need.
Thank you so much, Clementine. Paul, I'm going to turn to you and ask you about the Challenge Initiative. We just heard a little bit about it from Alan and people who were in the plenary this morning, but can you tell us a little bit about the model and why you're focusing on urban areas and what makes it different? You call it business unusual. Why is that?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to maybe share briefly about what we're doing. So I think the Challenge Initiative is one of the initiatives that's run by the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute, School of Hopkins. And really our business is about scale. Like how do we take what we know related to family planning to scale? So we are sort of in the second phase of our learning. We had our first phase under the Urban Reproductive Health Initiative, in which we tested different ways of trying to improve contraceptive prevalence rates. And in this second phase, the idea is now to take what we believe worked to scale. And at that point, when we did evaluation, we had seen an annual increase of about 3 percentage points in CPR, which we thought was significant to warrant scale up in other areas. So the business for us as the Challenge Initiative is really to take to scale what we learned beyond the locations that we want in. So initially we started in Senegal, Nigeria, India, and Kenya. So right now we have to do a lot more in East Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, a lot of the Ouagadougou partnership countries in West Africa, Burkina Faso, Senegal, and Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, and really also expand within Nigeria and India. So what's unique really about the way we do business is the fact that we are essentially a platform, a platform to sort of try and facilitate scale, rapid scale-up, but also sustainability at it. So we do work with local governments to challenge them to invest additional resources. We do work with donors also challenge them to invest additional resources in supporting the interventions that we believe are more effective. At the same time, the idea around working through this platform is that we ask cities to opt in. We are not pushing our interventions, all the interventions that are known to work in those locations, because we strongly believe that the element of leadership, support, and commitment in those cities is critical to ensuring the sustainability of these interventions. So it's a demand-driven, cities have to opt in, And they don't opt in by just saying, but they have to opt in by putting in financial commitments, actual resources on the table before then tapping into the resources of the challenge initiative. So far we are working across 90 cities in these locations, and we're looking to expand a bit more to other additional cities. One of the key elements to mention is, I think, the element around knowledge transfer. And I think we've been in the field of family planning for, I think, more than 30, 40 years. What needs to be done, I think, is clear, is known. But then the question is, we keep seeing errors, people repeating the same mistakes, implementing interventions that have been found to be ineffective. So one of the critical elements for us is really, how do we facilitate knowledge transfer for the interventions at and to work, and make sure that cities, local governments, facility charges, as you keep going down the chain, know what needs to be done and are able to implement it at their own level. So we do have sort of a virtual TCI university that also facilitates that process of knowledge transfer.
Very much, Paul. Now, you mentioned that the element of leadership is critical, and we have here with us a living example of that kind of leadership. Your Honor, the Mayor of Nakawa Division in Kampala, we'd like to ask you to talk a little bit about why you and your city decided to engage with the Challenge Initiative, how you, as a mayor, think about both the growth of the population of your city and the reproductive health needs of people in your city, and then what kind of arguments were persuasive to you to get involved with TCI.
Thank you very much. Once again, my name is Manuel Ronald Suga. Before I do begin answering the question, let me begin with some background information that is very vital for our discussion. Uganda has a population of 45 million. Kampala, where I act as mayor, because we have 5 divisions in the city. Nakawa, Central Division, Machimye, Lubaga, and Kawen. And I am the mayor of Nakawa Division, one of the divisions that make up the city. The city has a population of 1.6 million people there, but it doubles during the night. It has 1.6, and during the day it doubles. That is very, very important information. Uganda has the youngest population, I think, in the world. Over 48% are below the age of 14. Then between the age of 15 to 24, we have 21%. And this is the school-going age. I think I'm audible enough for you to listen. Am I?
Yes.
Okay. In Uganda, the fertility rate is so high. It is estimated that every woman produces 6 children. And when it comes to the urban poor areas, then it tends to 7. It says that over 48% are young people below the age of 14 years. And those that are between the age of 15 to 24 are 21.2%. This is the age that is school going and productive. And like I did tell you, in Uganda we have high fertility rate. Each woman is estimated to produce 6 children. And when it comes to urban poor areas, which form a big percentage of the city, it comes to 7. Kampala is made of very serious poor slums, characterized with poverty. And when you look at our health facilities, we have 1,497 health facilities in Kampala. 98 of those are private. And the cost of, basically, the cost of family planning becomes so high. The Challenge Initiative project is a co-funded project, like you have been told by Paul, that we have to make a commitment. So Kampala committed over 220 million, not US dollars, Uganda shillings. And why did we basically go to the Challenge Initiative? It is clear that access to safe, affordable, and voluntary family planning is a fundamental human right, and very many treaties has taken it as such. So when it comes to Uganda, particularly in the Kawa division, where I happen to be the mayor, like I told you, we have quite a number of slums, very poor people. And the poverty comes from parents having very many children that they cannot care for. The quality of life is very, very bad. That we thought what should be done is to look out for partners to help us, because Kampala did not have the capacity to reduce the fertility rate. So what we did was we carried out a survey of why we have very many stillbirths. Why do many parents, women die in hospitals while going for delivery? We found out that majority of these people actually came from those urban poor areas. And luckily enough, we had on radio the Challenge Initiative, doing miracles in areas of Mukono, areas of Uganda. And our director of public health wrote a concept and requested these miracle makers to come and help us have a reduction in have family planning practices, best practices in our area. Because what we actually used to do, we used to provide the contraceptives. KCC would provide the contraceptives, even those that were expensive. But the unfortunate bit is that we did not have skilled and knowledgeable midwives to administer those drugs. So what happened? Majority of them, those expensive methods, family planning methods, expired. And we lost lots of money because we did not have skilled personnel to administer the drugs. We wrote a concept, and we are happy to note that the Challenge Initiative came in to basically do a lot of things. One, I have told you that we have majority of our health facilities private, so they do charge money, expensive. And these are poor people that could not afford, and that's the reason that we used to have quite a number of stillbirth, number of women die. We have a irresponsible set of men nowadays who are only interested in sports betting. I don't know whether you have sports betting in your country. So they no longer care. They don't value education to make sure that we keep our children in schools, because one of the greatest family planning method is basically education. If you keep a child in school and maintain that child in school, you are doing good work. So what we did was we invited them, and they started teaching our people, our midwives, the best practices. Not only doing that, but they also came into publishing some of our facilities that had poor environment. So they equipped them with the protective gear. They trained our officers how to handle those expensive family planning methods, and we have now tremendously reduced. Yes, in just 1 year, believe me, we have an increase of 36% of family planning users in my division. So they have done quite a great work, and we pray that they are given more funding for at least a number of years. We have not come out to to find out the impact indicator, simply because we have gone 1 year. But I believe after 3 years, we shall have impact indicators that will be positive. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen. You want this?
Yes.
Please have it.
Thank you so much. That is a great real-life example with even short-term results, and I'm sure the longer-term results will be even more impactful. I'm going to turn now to Nkechi Owu. Nkechi, you are one of the fellows that IUSSP is supporting to work on urban fertility and family planning. And what your research project is about is looking at the links between, on the one hand, fertility, and on the other hand, household food security and child malnutrition in urban Nigeria. Can you give us a picture of urbanization in Nigeria and link that picture to the food and nutrition issues that you're studying, and tell us a little bit about the study. What data do you have and what results are you finding so far?
Thank you very much. So, similar to the situation that exists in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, the urbanization rate in Nigeria has been increasing. So, for example, according to the country's population commission, urbanization has been increasing at a rate of about 6.5% every year. Now, what this translates to is, for example, in the 1980s, where we had only about 2 Nigerians out of every 10 living in urban areas, currently we have as many as 5, so 50%, 5 out of every 10 Nigerians living in urban areas. Now, these high rates of urbanization have implications for food insecurity within these populations. Now, if you look at the statistics from the FAO, over time, the proportion of people who are malnourished has been reducing within the country. However, because of population changes, the absolute number of people who are malnourished in Nigeria is actually increasing. So this is something that is of concern to government to the Nigerian government. And you can see that evidence in the number of policies relating to increasing food production within the country. So what my research focuses on is establishing a link between fertility or household sizes and food security within Nigeria, paying attention to urban population or urban Nigeria. So if indeed I find some evidence to support my hypothesis that larger household sizes are at a higher risk of food insecurity, well then it suggests that perhaps instead of the seemingly sole focus on supply side solutions to food insecurity in the country, it might be worthwhile to consider also looking at demand-driven solutions. So for example, in Nigeria, only about 1 out of 10 women uses a modern contraceptive method. So there's some scope for sort of pushing the agenda on increasing the uptake of contraceptives within the country. Judith, you also asked about the data that I'm using for the exploration of these research questions. So I'm using 3 waves of the World Bank's Living Standards Measurement Survey. So they collected data in 2011, 2013, and then 2015. This data set is nationally representative, so it covers about 5,000 households and also includes about 1,500 urban households. Now the data set is really useful, very ideal for the examination of my research questions. So looking at the link between fertility and food security, because they collected a lot of detailed information on food security, both at the household level and then also at the individual level. So there's also a number of different ways to measure fertility, and I use about 5 different ways to proxy fertility at the household level, just to make sure that my results are robust. And yes, I do have some preliminary results to share at this point. So what I'm finding is that in urban Nigeria, indeed, larger households are at a higher risk of food insecurity. So I'm finding that urban households in Nigeria are having to adopt more coping strategies in the face of food deficits. So for example, they're having to skip meals, they're having to go to their neighbors and families, friends to borrow money to be able to afford food. They're having to rely on lower quality food, so for example, focus on starchy foods as opposed to fruits and vegetables, which we know are important for a nutritious meal. In urban Nigeria, we're also seeing situations where children, perhaps, so some family members within the household will eat while others cannot because of food shortages. We're also finding that children who live in these households, these larger households, also have long-term negative implications for their health. So in the long term, children's nutritional status is affected when they reside in households that are relatively larger in urban Nigeria. So these are some of the early results that I'm finding from my research.
Thank you so much to all of you so far. I'm always very committed to audience participation. We're about halfway through the panelists' remarks. I wanted to see if anyone had a specific question or comment for a panel member. Would anyone like to intervene at this point? Yes, please introduce yourself and say whether your question is to a specific person or not.
My name, I'm Shem Laki, from Senegal, retired. So my question is about demand for family planning, and it goes to both John, Clementine, and Christian. What the Ouagadougou partnership, Clementine, that you referred to, is finding with Track 20 data is that contraceptive use is increasing faster in West Africa, in those Francophone countries, faster than demand for family planning, demand for contraceptives. And that soon, probably this is going to hit a ceiling, whereby if demand don't increase and use is increasing, sooner or later you will just finish the low-hanging fruits that you are. So is this, because the data is at the national level, I don't know whether anybody has looked at the urban separation between urban and rural and whether there are differences in the evolution of demand.
Is there one more question?
So my name is John Garner, Ghana School of Health. So my question is actually to the mayor and then the Challenger initiative. So it looks like that's a really great kind of collaboration between the city and your initiative. So I'm just thinking about, I imagine there's going to be a point where the initiative is going to end. So my question to you and then the mayor is, what is the exit strategy, especially given that maybe the mayor, may not be in that position, all the time. So what happens when you leave? Is there a strategy to kind of like get it going, and especially at that political city level?
Well, one of our questions for the second half is about sustainability. So we'll be getting to that in just a moment. Let's see, who would like to address Dr. Mbaki's comments?
Sheikh, my answer to you is that the advent and normalization of contraception is likely to destabilize high demand for children. That motive and means are interconnected in a way that we don't usually recognize, and that once a population realizes that it's socially and morally acceptable, and perfectly feasible, and safe to use methods to regulate fertility, they are able to rethink whether they need 4 children, maybe 3 is better. So demand is not static, it's going to be changed by contraceptive promotion. That would be my answer to you.
Thank you very much for the question, Chief. So I feel as if a lot of the demand for children, yes, so it's by, in Nigeria, for example, yes, by mothers and by fathers alike. So when we think about the access to contraceptives, oftentimes one of the limitations is, well, perhaps a woman wants to go in for the contraceptives, her husband is not in complete agreement. So what I'm hoping that my research will do is to provide a little bit more of the, well, why should we, sort of into the argument. So yes, we know that a woman having a lot of children has implications for her health, the health of her children. But now, from the research, we know that it affects husbands as well, grandparents as well, everybody within the household, their access to food. So it's hope that, yes, even though we have these cultural and social norms, that we hope that education will change, there's also an encouragement for our own well-being, for husbands' well-being, for all the family members, to sort of be aligned with these goals of reducing family sizes, because it has implications for everyone's well-being within the household.
And very quickly, I would say that unmet needs are still very large, so there is work for still a decade, just absorbing those. And also we hope that since the efforts on improving the economy are concurrent, that changing in the economic condition will also necessarily bring a change in demand.
Paul and Your Honor, would you like to talk about John's question now, or would you like from him?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, like she did say, that sustainability is very, very important. We know that very soon, but not so soon, the challenge initiative will go and leave us. But we also have begun working on the policies that are going to guide us and help us for sustainability. Currently, there are some bills in Parliament, like I will talk about them, that are going to create a very good environment for family planning. So we are set, and we basically we shall be ready by the time they leave us.
Thank you. I think maybe just to add to that question, I think it's one of the critical elements for the challenge initiative. So our thinking and even our engagement with cities, not just here in Kampala, but all the 90 cities across the globe, is that we are expecting that increasingly with every year of our partnership, that the amount of resources that locations put on the table increases. We had actually, in East Africa, we had set a threshold of 5% increase in their commitment to warrant us to continue being present every year. And I'm glad to say, I think across East Africa, we have had an average of each of the cities actually increasing by around 10, some even up to around 20% increase in their amounts and their commitment. And it is important because one of the elements of sustainability is that the resources have to be there. The resources to continue some of the work have to be put on the table. And we are saying we don't want to be the only people putting, and then the whole machinery collapses. But the second element around resources is that with the challenge initiative, we also challenge other partners, so that this is not only the work of TCI, but we want other partners, but also importantly, other high net worth individuals within those locations to also invest in family planning. So part of the challenge initiative is actually used to motivate other potential high net worth individuals so that they can put their resources into a city's sort of plan for family planning, so that it's a shared pool, so that even if TCI is not there, then they can catalyze the process of other players, other high net worth individuals investing in the process. Finally, the element that programs always deal with is how do you know a city is ready to be left on their own. So we do have what we are calling there's a tool, a quality and sustainability assessment tool, to help monitor and know, should we actually pull out after 2 years or 3 years, or even then after 2 years when we assess the location, what is the gap that our funding should direct so that it can continue to ensure that the sustainability elements happen. Finally, the element of sustainability is also a knowledge issue. We believe that if the locations know the right things to do, even in the absence of programs, then they shall continue to do the right things. And we've seen this, for example, in Kenya, when they saw the importance of the community-based distribution program, they have actually enacted a law in their parliament to actually pay for the community-based distributors out of government resources. So I believe also knowledge transfer is an important element of sustainability. So they know and then they can act on the right things.
Thank you so much. We'll have another opportunity for a round of questions after our next set of questions for our panel. So I'm going to return